That's right. And salute everyone. I apologize for not being able to do this in French. I have been working hard on my French, but it is a long journey, and this is it's definitely I'm appreciating more and more the complexities of the English language as I understand the complexities of the French language. It's definitely an interesting process. But I will now go off and share my slides. And can everyone see that all right? Excellent. Well, I'm definitely enjoying France. I arrived in October, and I'm here till August, and there's just definitely been definitely so much to learn, and definitely was nice that DrupalCon Lille I was able to be here for that and be part of that celebration of Drupal in here in France as well. But to begin with, I'm Mike Gifford. I'm a Drupal core accessibility maintainer, and I'm still working for Civic Actions, but I've been doing so from France as I've been here, and it's been a really interesting process trying to go off and to work from 3 p.m. to 11 p.m. in order to go off and maintain work with my colleagues who are working Eastern time. But the focus of the conversation is on Drupal sustainability and building to the RGESN. And I've brought on Laurent Devernay Satyagraha from Green Spectre to go off and to both break up the conversation so that it's not all in English, but also because Laurent has some wonderful background and experience in this area and is doing some work on Drupal as well. So I think it's an interesting way to go off and pair this up so that we can have a perspective from the Drupal side as well as from the sustainability side, sort of looking at Drupal. So that's the two angles we're trying to go off and to cover within this. So yes, there's a new set of guidelines out there that is part of the WC3 set. It's a draft community guidelines, so it's definitely not formalized. But in looking at digital sustainability, we've tried to go off and break this down into UX design, web development, hosting and infrastructure, as well as business practices. And there's lots of ways to try and to look at digital sustainability and to find ways to make it easier to understand the environmental impact of our digital lives. And it's so easy to overlook them. Just like with accessibility, if you don't have a disability, it's hard to see where the errors might be. If you're not using a screen reader, you're not using other tools. So trying to make, part of the point of these guidelines is to make the invisible visible. So with UX design, for example, one of the things that the WC3's community the community group is working on is trying to make it easier for people to implement themes that use less energy on devices. So simple things like allowing people to choose a dark mode is something that can actually improve user experience, improve accessibility, as well as use less energy on devices. Another element from the web sustainability guidelines is trying to make sure that the website itself is accessible for everyone, because if your website is more accessible, people are going to be able to come and accomplish their tasks more quickly. And since we know that 25% of people have a disability, it's an area that building a more accessible website means that people are able to more quickly get their jobs done. Web development is another area that the web sustainability guidelines have focused on, and there's elements that are more technical in nature for that, and these are sort of these 4 guidelines are very much like for accessibility. The POUR structure within accessibility is the perceivable, operable, understandable, and robust. But this is a framework trying to go off and look at UX design, web development, hosting infrastructure, and best practices. So it's a different orientation, not quite the catchy acronym, but a similar kind of idea of building pillars of how you often approach looking at digital sustainability. So for web development, part of it is looking at optimizing CSS and JavaScript, finding ways to eliminate code you're not using, using modern formats, and that's something that is a real challenge for even content management systems like Drupal, because by default we're not using the WebP infrastructure or AVIF or other modern images. We're allowing people to use JPEGs and PNGs as they normally do because they're easy. Hosting infrastructure, again, trying to go up and look for renewable energy sources, trying to make sure that you're being more efficient in your use of your technology and caching, so that you're making sure that you're able to have more effective energy use per user. Business practices, like there's you can have the most environmentally friendly website ever, but if it's there to go off and promote something that is ultimately environmentally destructive, then that's an area where it's a bit of a mixed practice. We want to go off and make sure that websites are promoting good practices and are reducing the overall digital carbon footprints, as opposed to being used for greenwashing or other things. Another aspect of the business practice angle is trying to educate team members about sustainability best practices, both in terms of their personal and professional lives. So those are just some highlights about this new and evolving WC3 guideline that is being worked on. So looking specifically at Drupal and sustainability, we've got a couple things to think about. There are things like the server-side performance. This is something that there's a long history of trying to address issues like this within the Drupal community, because, and in fact, it's one of the core gates of Drupal, because performance is a real barrier to adoption. If people require faster servers, and if you're not able to get the queries as effectively as you need to, that's something that definitely is affects a lot of user experience. That ties into caching and optimization. We haven't actually done a lot of work to look at evaluating the CO2 of servers within the Drupal community, but this is something that we're starting to go off and look at. So, for example, how many servers are you using to go off and run your website? Do you have a separate Redis or Memcache server? Are you putting your files into the Amazon Web Services on an S3 bucket? How are you structuring things? Are you using a CDN? All that stuff plays into question when you're actually implementing sustainability, and making sure that we have good guidelines for this within the Drupal community is good, and also making sure, for that matter, that Drupal.org is following the best practices so that we're able to meet that as a community. There's definitely a need for faster front-end load times, and again, if we're able to get rid of things like jQuery and use more native JavaScript implementations that are custom built for our use purposes, we'll be able to have faster load times, because we're not going to be loading information that is not relevant for our needs. Likewise, if we're able to just reduce the number of divs and find that we're delivering less information to our visitors, because we have less HTML, CSS, and JavaScript that we're actually passing across the internet to assume that they'll be able to access. It's also important for Drupal to look at how do we monitor this information over time. With every release of Drupal, is the performance going up or down? How do we try and evaluate this so that we're keeping an eye on this as we're releasing new versions of Drupal, and putting additional pressure on our teams to make sure that Drupal is remaining to be as performant as it can be, and not just sort of assuming that everyone's just going to go off and have a faster server than they did in 2022, because it's now 2024 and the prices are cheaper, and it's easier to go off and to get a faster server to go off and deliver the same content as you would as you were currently doing in 2022. Sustainability is also something that can be very easily integrated into the CI/CD pipeline. Certainly, there's lots of opportunities for Google Lighthouse, for instance, to be incorporated into that to evaluate whether or not pages are if there's accessibility errors being introduced, if there's SEO benefits, if there's challenges for mobile users that are part of that process, and as we all know, working within that pipeline and catching these errors early is something that we can use to make sure that we're being more efficient and effective in our development processes. So I wanted to touch a little bit about what comprises a Drupal site. It's not gonna be news for most people here, but there's a few things to look at from sustainability. So there's Drupal core, and this is where I've spent most of my time looking at that. There's also modules and themes which are part of the contrib environment, and again those can have a huge impact on accessibility or sustainability, because they can those modules and themes can radically alter the HTML that's being presented to the browser. It's also useful to keep in mind that there's a lot of third-party applications that are still being used within Drupal. So something like Google Analytics or Tag Manager, I guess is what it's called now. You're going to have a bunch of places where JavaScript is being added for convenience or for monitoring or tracking, and that's something that's important to try and keep in mind. Custom code is another thing that there's very few websites out there that are not built with custom code. So trying to keep a sense of that, and how much how is that affecting the performance of your website. One of the things that there's been a big movement around headless implementations in Drupal, which is great. And actually, headless implementations tend to be much faster than sites that are using HTML as the output. So it is something that some people are looking for as a way to reduce the carbon impact for their website. The other is looking at user-generated content, whether that's the Forms API or like your traditional Forms input for Drupal with the editor, or CK editor. Both of these are areas that we can do more to try and reduce the CO2. Like if a user is uploading an image, how are we making sure that image is optimized? Can we switch the formats, that if it's uploaded as a PNG file, we can have that be converted on the fly so that it's served up to the client as a WebP format, as opposed to a less efficient PNG file? How do we try and make it as easy as possible for the user to go off and build something that has those sustainability best practices in there, and supporting a good authoring environment. For accessibility, this is very much like ATAG 2.0, the authoring tool accessibility guidelines. We want to make sure that the interface itself is sustainable, but we also want to make sure that the results of that interface are supporting a sustainable content for everyone. So thinking about it in that way. So there's lots of different ways to get involved, and part of what I'm excited about coming in and presenting here is that we need to have people engaged with Drupal sustainability. And France, as Laurent will be talking later, France is really a leader around digital sustainability and adopting best practices that really are going to be necessary for other countries around the world to emulate. So there's an opportunity here, because of requirements of the French government, to try and use to push ahead Drupal so that it is more of a leader in the space than it currently is. But in terms of ways of getting involved, there's 10 open sustainability issues in core. There's 349 performance issues in core. So both of those are areas where people can get involved. I'll be making the slides available afterwards so people will be able to access this. But definitely look in the issue queue for the tags sustainability and or performance, and you can easily find information there. There's similar issues being tagged around the contrib files as well, or the contrib projects, but definitely look at that. We are in a climate crisis, and it's important to think about what is the impact of the work that we're doing, and making sure that we're talking about this issue, whether it's in webinars like this, or DrupalCon, or Drupal camps, or other sort of tech events. It's important that sustainability is something that is being discussed and is part of the conversation, so that although we're all excited about AI and the opportunities that AI is bringing, AI doesn't matter if we don't have a sustainable planet to go off and for us to live on. People and planet really are necessary for anything else that we're pursuing as a civilization. I wanted to remind people that there is it's the sustainability team channel. It's not the sustainability channel, it's the sustainability-team channel. On most other places, that I've using sustainability, it's just sustainability. But there was an effort to try and broaden sustainability, to go off and also look at how do we try and make sure that it's economically viable as well, and that we're able to support the work that needs to be done in the Drupal community around maintaining and continuing to innovate. So it's hashtag sustainability-team. I recommend that if people are interested in sustainability, they join groups like climateaction.tech, which is a really great and thriving Slack community where there's a lot of discussions back and forth about different topics, and that's definitely something that's worth looking at. Also, I'm not sure how many people here have looked at Wagtail as a CMS, but they're doing some really interesting work trying to go and to think about how they're structuring or calculating their overall CO2 impact. It's difficult to go off and especially with an open source project, to say how many people are using it, what is the size of the impact of that product. But Wagtail's tried to go off and provide an overview of that to engage around the impact of their project. I also recommend people look to see if they can start a conversation with their team or company to go off and to engage around sustainability. There's so many resources and so much information around digital sustainability out there. It's definitely rapidly evolving as a field of interest, and there's so much information available from governments, or not from governments as much, but from sources like this climateaction.tech community. Wanted to touch on a couple different tools so that people are aware of them. Unlighthouse.dev and Google Lighthouse are really both good tools for evaluating the performance of a website, and there's a strong correlation between performance and sort of load times, and also the climate impact. It's not a one-to-one relationship, but definitely things that you get from Google Lighthouse, you'll be able to go off and will help reduce your CO2 footprint, and that's definitely a good starting point for people to look at. So again, unlighthouse.dev will allow you to do a multi-page scan, and Google Lighthouse will allow you to do a one-page scan. SiteSpeed.io is also another great tool that people can use, and you can use the Axe plugin for that, as well as the CO2.js plugin. CO2.js is an open source tool that is developed by the Green Web Foundation, and it provides a way of estimating the overall climate impact of a web page using the best practices that are available. Webpagetest.org also has an integration with CO2.js, so that's something to look at as well. Specifically looking at Drupal and Drupal's performance on the server, I'd recommend people look at Gander, which is a performance monitoring tool for Drupal core that Tag One is starting to build out, and that's a really useful tool. Also, Lighthouse-CI is a tool that you can incorporate into your CI/CD pipeline if you want to go off and evaluate your the impact, your performance impact on as you're building your site. From a single page perspective, looking at this, I would recommend websitecarbon.com and ecograder.com as two sites that are trying to provide a dashboard to both raise awareness. They're kind of like where the wave is, or the accessibility insights, to try and help people understand the impact of a web page, and to help point people to new resources, and sort of provide a sense of why does this matter, and what do I start doing to get involved in this area. So both of those can be quite useful. So there's a number of issues I wanted to just quickly highlight that are part of Drupal. But like there's again quite a few issues that are available, but I wanted to tag some of them that are tied to content. So this is looking at this is from the web content accessibility, sorry, the web sustainability guidelines. So one of them is to build a lightweight experience by default. So Drupal core has always had a vision of being a small core, so that it's very efficient. Can we make it smaller? Can we make it lighter? Can we make a better experience out of the box for people who are starting with Drupal? 2.12 is document your work to support better reuse. Again, is there a sustainability page on your website? Just like there's the European Union is calling for an accessibility page, is there a sustainability page? Can you provide information that allows people to understand what you've done to build your website in a more sustainable way? Can you document your work so that people know that the theme or the module that you've done has already had some amount of sustainability done to it to help people move ahead? Item 2.114 is write with purpose in plain language. Again, are you reviewing your content with a tool like the Hemingway app? Or there's actually, I don't actually know if the Hemingway app works in French. That's an interesting challenge. I've run into some issues with trying to find tools, readability tools that work well for non-English languages, and it is a real challenge how that's set up. And I don't know enough about what are the best practices for things like there's in Drupal a readability module, analyzer module, that uses the Flesch-Kincaid model, but there might be a better model out there that is better for the French language. I wanted to touch just briefly on issues around images and media. I've already talked a bit about that, but how do we optimize images by default? And likewise, how do we make sure that accessibility, that your work is as accessible as possible by default? So again, for security, there's also an overlap there. So the guidelines are really structured in a way that allows you to look at them from a number of different angles. So again, if your website is insecure, it is likely also going to be a risk of having a climate impact, because if somebody hacks into the website and starts advertising Viagra or using it to mine Bitcoin, that's something that'll have a much larger environmental impact. So rigorously assessing your third-party services, validating errors. These are all things that are just part of implementing good practices, but also something that does ultimately have a sustainability impact. So even things like making sure you're using the latest stable version of a product, that's something that the Drupal community has been quite good at, trying to make sure that people are keeping their software up to date, both in terms of Drupal core as well as in the related modules. But that's something that has a sustainability impact as well. So there will be more room for questions afterwards, but I think that it probably makes sense, unless there's just pass it over to Laurent, and we'll just sort of answer the questions in a combined way at the end. Does that make sense, or is there a burning question that people have for what I've presented thus far? Go, Jim, and Vanessa. Who would like to go first? Joachim, do you want to go first? Oh, sorry, mistake. Okay, Vanessa, did you have a question? All right, excellent. That's right.
Ça marche. Donc on va rebasculer en français. Je vais vous partager mon écran et alors ce qu'on va faire, la finalité, c'est de vous expliquer les liens entre le RGESN, déjà ce que c'est le RGESN et Drupal. Et pour ça, on va revenir déjà un petit peu à la base. Hem, donc déjà, je voilà, je resitue un petit peu parce qu'au final, tout le monde n'a pas forcément, le même niveau d'info. Le constat de base, c'est le numérique a des impacts environnementaux. Donc là, à droite, c'est le dernier rapport ADEME-ARCEP, où ils expliquent que le numérique, au global, c'est 2,5% des émissions de gaz à effet de serre en France en 2020 et que ça devrait augmenter de 45% d'ici 2030. Donc en fait, ça va complètement à l'opposé des objectifs qu'on a dans le cadre de la crise climatique. Donc déjà, on se rend compte que c'est un premier souci. Et quand on regarde de plus près, on voit que quasiment 80% des impacts, c'est du côté des terminaux utilisateurs et que c'est en grande partie à cause de leur fabrication. Historiquement, il y a quelques années, quand on parlait des impacts environnementaux du numérique, le premier effet, c'était de dire: «Ah oui, c'est les data centers». Alors, c'est vrai que les data centers, c'est pas négligeable, mais c'est toujours moins impactant que nos terminaux parce que, il y en a plusieurs milliards qui sont renouvelés très souvent et qui sont très, très coûteux d'un point de vue environnemental à produire. Donc ça, c'est le constat de départ. Quand on part de ça, on se dit: «OK, bah, c'est simple, on prolonge la durée de vie des terminaux» et pour ça, on va au-delà de l'obsolescence matérielle, de se dire qu'au bout d'un certain temps, mon téléphone, ma tablette, ils sont juste plus utilisables, pour aller sur l'obsolescence logicielle. De se dire qu'une grosse partie de cette obsolescence, elle est induite par, tous les applicatifs qu'il y a dessus. Hem, Bah, par exemple, c'est, je ne peux pas mettre à jour telle appli mobile parce que ma version d'Android ou d'iOS, ne se met plus à jour. Je ne peux pas aller sur, tel site web parce que, bah, juste il rame comme pas possible. Donc à partir de là, on va aller dans l'éco-conception appliquée aux services numériques. Donc voir qu'est-ce qu'on peut faire pour, entre guillemets «pérenniser» nos services numériques, faire qu'ils soient, utilisables plus longtemps et dans de meilleures conditions pour les utilisateurs. Alors, pour ça, il y a des outils. L'outil qui est souvent évoqué en premier, c'est l'analyse de cycle de vie. L'analyse de cycle de vie, donc avec des normes ISO dont je vous passe les détails, c'est on va prendre en compte tous les impacts environnementaux sur tout le cycle de vie du service numérique, donc de sa création à sa fin de vie, et en tenant compte pas seulement du CO2 comme on voit souvent, mais aussi de tout ce qui est ozone, acidification, eutrophisation. Donc il y en a beaucoup. Et ça, c'est, on va dire, c'est un point de départ. C'est quelque chose qui permet de se rendre compte des impacts en question. L'idée, c'est qu'en général, en tout cas en tant que développeur, chef de projet, en tout cas quelqu'un qui travaille sur des services numériques, on va laisser les analyses de cycle de vie plutôt à des profils dédiés et on va trouver des compromis via des outils de mesure et si possible en s'appuyant sur de l'inventaire de cycle de vie. C'est-à-dire que le plus possible, on va s'appuyer sur des bases de données existantes pour avoir les impacts de ce qui se passe côté serveur, de combien ça coûte de fabriquer un téléphone, et le reste, on va compléter avec de la mesure ponctuelle sur des scénarios prédéfinis, et ainsi de suite. C'est ce qu'on va voir un petit peu ici. Et donc, pour ça, il y a deux notions importantes. Donc, le service numérique, c'est de se dire que, OK, même si je veux acheter un billet de train sur Internet, pour ça, derrière, il y a des ressources matérielles, il y a des ressources humaines, il y a des ressources logicielles, et c'est tout ça qu'il faut prendre en compte. Et l'éco-conception, pour répondre à ça, c'est la réduction des impacts environnementaux, on va dire comme le nom l'indique, sur toutes les étapes du cycle de vie et via de l'amélioration continue. C'est pas quelque chose qu'on va faire une fois et du jour au lendemain, les choses vont s'arranger, mais c'est quelque chose qu'on va suivre dans le temps. Et pour ça, bon, ça, on va pas trop rentrer dans le détail ici, mais il y a différents niveaux d'éco-conception. Il y a le premier basique où on va optimiser des images, faire des modifs de code, de l'optimisation, typiquement les optimisations techniques de performance. On va aller sur jusqu'au niveau 4. Le niveau 3, c'est déjà de se dire on va repenser la façon dont on met à disposition les services numériques. Peut-être qu'il n'y a pas besoin d'une appli mobile, peut-être qu'à la place, on peut proposer une progressive web app ou un service SMS. Plutôt que de proposer un tableau de bord en ligne, on peut proposer un courriel qui va faire la même chose, mais souvent de façon plus satisfaisante et moins impactante. Et le niveau 4, c'est on repense le business model. Là, c'est on est directement au plus haut niveau de l'entreprise, on revoit la stratégie Et c'est, par exemple, là, c'est pas pour un service numérique, mais c'est par exemple Decathlon qui va aller davantage vers du reconditionné, Patagonia qui va davantage mettre en avant le fait de conserver les produits le plus longtemps possible, et c'est un peu cette logique-là. Euh, donc, pour ça, ce qui est important à retenir, c'est d'avoir tout le cycle de vie du service numérique, sachant que là, on estime qu'il y a 80% des impacts environnementaux qui sont sur la conception. Plus précisément, entre la collecte des besoins et l'analyse, et la conception, c'est là qu'on aura les leviers les plus importants. Donc pour ça, alors là, on a l'air de changer un petit peu de sujet, mais ça va bien se passer, je vous rassure. On a la loi REEN en France. La loi REEN, c'est réduction de l'empreinte environnementale du numérique, qui a été publiée fin 2021, où dedans, il y a plein de choses. L'enjeu global, c'est de sensibiliser sur les impacts environnementaux, de chapeauter ce qui se passe dessus, et de faire ce qu'il faut pour limiter les dégâts déjà. Donc, il y a plein de choses sur former dès le plus jeune âge, etc. Ça, à la limite, c'est important, mais ce n'est pas le sujet ici. Dans ce qui est peut-être un peu plus impactant, ce que vous avez peut-être déjà vu passer, c'est l'obligation de former les élèves ingénieurs dans des filières informatiques à l'éco-conception. Aujourd'hui, dans toutes ces filières-là, dans les écoles d'ingé, ils ont obligation de proposer un module sur l'éco-conception de services numériques. C'est la base et c'est déjà hyper important. À côté de ça, il y a des actions pour prolonger la durée de vie des appareils numériques. C'est ce qu'on a vu que c'est là qu'il y a le plus d'impact. On va faire ce qu'on peut pour que ça n'arrive pas. Il y a des choses aussi pour imposer l'éco-conception sur les sites web. Donc c'est surtout ça qu'on va voir juste après. Donc là, on mentionne les sites web. Ce qu'on sait, c'est qu'aujourd'hui, il y a le référentiel qui est sorti, que ce sera les sites web, c'est sûr, mais que ce sera peut-être aussi les applications mobiles, l'IoT, le mobilier urbain, un peu comme ce qui est fait côté accessibilité en France avec le RG2A. Jusqu'à très récemment, c'était les sites web. En octobre dernier, il y a eu un nouveau décret qui vient élargir le domaine d'application, les entreprises concernées, qui vient renforcer les sanctions et qui vient dire aujourd'hui, ce ne sera pas que les sites web, mais on va embarquer tout ce qui est objet connecté, tout ce qui est appli mobile et tout ce qui est mobilier urbain. Alors déjà, pour le site web, c'était pas évident l'accessibilité. Quand on commence à s'attaquer au mobilier urbain, on sait qu'on ne va pas s'ennuyer. Il y a des actions aussi côté data center et réseau. Donc ça, pas de souci, c'est en cours. Et il y a aussi des éléments du côté des territoires, au niveau des structures publiques qui ont plus de 50 000 habitants, qui doivent avoir une feuille de route numérique responsable, ce qui est déjà un bon point de départ. Ça, c'est en cours et ça fait avancer les choses. Je vous passe rapidement, mais en gros, du côté comment dire, des lois, des obligations qui vont toucher les services numériques et leurs impacts environnementaux. Donc, on a la loi REEN qu'on vient de voir. Il y a la CSRD au niveau européen qui commence à se mettre en place, où en gros, c'est la double matérialité et le fait de tracer les impacts environnementaux de ces services numériques et de communiquer dessus. Donc ça, c'est en cours. Et surtout, en France, le point important, ça va être le RGESN, donc Référentiel Général d'éco-conception de services numériques. Donc ça, à l'origine, c'est un travail qui avait été lancé au niveau de l'Institut du numérique responsable sur l'idée, c'était de créer un référentiel de bonnes pratiques qui concerne tous les services numériques sur toutes les étapes de leur cycle de vie pour tous les profils métiers concernés. Donc moi, j'avais la chance de travailler là-dessus. C'était un gros chantier. À la fin, ils ont sorti un référentiel où aujourd'hui, il y a 516 bonnes pratiques. Le truc, c'est que ce n'est pas un référentiel où vous pouvez vous dire du jour au lendemain, je vais tester la conformité de mon service numérique et ça va aller vite. Là, c'est surtout un point de référence où quand vous vous posez des questions sur est-ce que j'ai bien appliqué les principes de conception responsable sur mon service numérique, vous cherchez dedans et c'est assez complet, vous devriez trouver les réponses. Le truc, c'est que là-dessus, l'État français s'est décidé de se l'approprier et de l'adapter pour faire quelque chose d'un peu plus applicable et un peu plus orienté, on va dire, audit de conformité, et derrière probablement un décret d'application pour en faire une obligation légale. Il y a eu une première version donc, de ce RGESN en 2021. Il y a eu une version en octobre 2023 qui avait été mise en consultation publique, et la version finale, elle est sortie il y a 2 semaines, là, le 17 mai. Et l'idée, c'est d'avoir 78 critères répartis dans 9 familles. Ouais, j'ai mis 8, mais si on compte, il y en a 9. Parce qu'ils ont rajouté aussi tout ce qui est algorithmie. Ce qu'ils appellent algorithmie, c'est intelligence artificielle. Donc, c'est un peu un abus de langage. Mais l'idée, c'est qu'il y a toutes ces bonnes pratiques dedans. L'idée, c'est chaque bonne pratique, on a Bon, niveau de difficulté, niveau de priorité, quel type de services sont concernés. L'idée, c'est de pouvoir déceler ceux pour lesquels un critère ne sera pas applicable. Bah, déjà, tous ceux qui concernent l'intelligence artificielle, si vous n'en embarquez pas dans votre service numérique, vous pouvez laisser de côté. Et après, de voir comment ça se met en œuvre, ce critère, et comment on contrôle que ça a bien été mis en œuvre. Donc ça, c'est le gros chantier, parce que, les services numériques publics et les grosses entreprises savent que, va y avoir un décret d'application cette année pour que ce soit, obligatoire dès l'année prochaine, a priori, ou l'année suivante. Donc, il y a un moment, il va falloir qu'ils se mettent en conformité, en ordre de marche là-dessus. Hem L'aspect intéressant de ce RGESN, c'est que c'est pas un référentiel pour vous dire: «Est-ce que mon service numérique est éco-conçu?» C'est un référentiel qui va plus loin, qui va vous permettre aussi de structurer votre démarche d'éco-conception. Au-delà des critères, purement techniques de est-ce qu'il y a du cache côté client, est-ce qu'il y a du cache côté serveur, et cetera. Il y a des critères du style: est-ce que vous avez un référent d'éco-conception en interne? Est-ce que quand vous avez, pensé ce service numérique, vous avez bien évalué ses apports et ses coûts environnementaux avant de lancer les travaux? Est-ce que vous avez bien fait de la recherche utilisateur? Et ainsi de suite. Donc ça va très, très loin et c'est plutôt une bonne chose parce qu'aujourd'hui, le sujet de l'éco-conception, il est encore relativement récent. En tout cas, il prend beaucoup d'ampleur depuis à peu près 3-4 ans et c'est important d'aider les structures à aller plus loin dans cette démarche, sachant que donc là, je vous ai mis le lien, je vous enverrai les slides de la version en ligne. Il est proposé en français et en anglais parce que la stratégie au niveau de ce référentiel, c'est l'applicabilité et le décret d'application en France rapidement cette année, mais aussi pas perdre de temps pour aller aussi l'imposer au niveau européen. Donc, ça veut dire que, soit vous travaillez déjà dans une structure publique ou dans une grande entreprise et c'est sûr que dans les mois à venir, vous allez avoir cette obligation-là. Soit vous travaillez, par exemple, bah, ça a été évoqué très vite fait avant, dans une ESN ou dans une agence web et en face de vous, vous allez très probablement bientôt avoir des clients, des gros clients qui, dans leurs, appels d'offres, dans leurs ouvertures de marché, dans leur cahier des charges, vont mentionner l'éco-conception avec soit des critères de mesure, des budgets environnementaux de je veux pas que chaque page fasse plus de 500 kilooctets, 30 requêtes HTTP, ainsi de suite, soit des critères en termes de conformité. Je veux que le service numérique que vous allez me livrer, il ait au moins 75% de conformité, qui est dans tous les cas un audit RGESN, sachant que cet audit, c'est on passe la grille et on prend tous les critères pour voir si on est conforme ou pas et un plan d'action pour être conforme quand c'est possible, mais aussi une déclaration d'éco-conception qui sera publiée sur tous les services numériques concernés, au même titre que la déclaration d'accessibilité, de dire aujourd'hui notre score d'avancement c'est tant, on a fait ça, ça et ça, les critères qui sont bons c'est cela, ceux qui ne sont pas bons c'est cela, et sur les prochaines années, notre stratégie vis-à-vis de l'éco-conception c'est tel point, tel point, tel point. Formation, sensibilisation, des audits de la mesure, et ainsi de suite. Donc ça va arriver très vite, et et en vrai, c'est plutôt une très bonne chose. Ce que ça sous-entend aussi, ce référentiel, c'est que dedans, il y a la notion de stratégie de mesure, de se dire, c'est pas juste de la conformité en déclaratif en disant oui, on a fait ça, oui, on a fait ça. C'est aussi de se dire, on veut que le service numérique fonctionne sur des terminaux anciens, donc ça, on arrive à le chiffrer, à mettre des profils de matériel sur lesquels ça va fonctionner, et derrière, on vérifie que ça fonctionne. Donc soit de façon bête et méchante, où je fais le truc à la main et je vérifie que je peux le faire de A à Z, mon parcours utilisateur, soit derrière, je mets de la mesure en me mettant des métriques techniques, en disant, quand je suis sur un terminal ancien, ce parcours ne devrait pas prendre plus de 3-4 minutes, et ainsi de suite. Donc c'est vraiment tout ça qui est en train de se mettre en place aujourd'hui. Donc ça, je l'ai déjà évoqué, on attend le décret d'application, mais ça devrait arriver. Euh, Ça, c'est l'extrait de la loi REEN où ils expliquent que bah, concrètement, ça va arriver très très vite et ça devait arriver le 1er janvier 2024, mais concrètement, ça va arriver un peu plus tard cette année, mais ça arrive. Donc là-dessus, euh, ben, donc, je ne me suis pas présenté, j'aurais pu commencer par ça. Moi, je travaille en tant que consultant numérique responsable dans une société qui s'appelle Green Inspector. Donc, numérique responsable, souvent, on fait l'amalgame avec l'éco-conception. Ça va plus loin. On embarque aussi dans le sujet tout ce qui est accessibilité, sécurité, les données personnelles, l'éthique, l'inclusion. Donc, tout un tas de sujets sur comment on conçoit le numérique pour qu'il soit respectueux à la fois des individus et de la planète. Et chez Inspector, c'est une boîte qui a plus de 10 ans. Le principe de base, c'était de développer un outil de mesure sur les services numériques, quels qu'ils soient, pour derrière pouvoir estimer les impacts environnementaux. Le numérique, vous ne pouvez pas directement mesurer les impacts environnementaux, vous devez les évaluer. Donc pour ça, il y a un modèle de projection environnementale et l'idée, c'est d'accompagner les clients. Typiquement, aujourd'hui, en tout cas en ce qui me concerne, une bonne partie de l'activité, c'est déployer l'outil chez les clients via de la formation, du déploiement de licences, tout ça, et c'est accompagner les clients dans leur démarche d'éco-conception via des audits RGESN. Donc la version finale, elle date d'il y a 2 semaines, mais il y avait déjà une version depuis un peu plus de 2 ans. Donc c'est faire les audits de conformité avec eux et les aider à structurer leur démarche. C'est une démarche qui est hyper importante parce que on peut pas juste faire de l'audit, de dire bah non, bah ça c'est pas bien, ça c'est pas bien, ça c'est bien, débrouillez-vous. On voit qu'aujourd'hui, il n'y a pas le niveau de maturité suffisant dans les structures, quelles qu'elles soient d'ailleurs, pour que ça puisse se faire comme ça. Et on constate aujourd'hui que dans les structures publiques, il y a beaucoup de Drupal qui est utilisé, soit directement, soit via des fabriques à sites. Euh, Notamment dans les métropoles, qui ont, en tout cas celles avec lesquelles on travaille, des espèces d'énormes fabriques à sites avec lesquelles ils produisent la plupart des sites qui sortent tout le temps et qui sont basés sur du Drupal. Et donc derrière, quand on fait un audit RGESN et plus globalement quand on fait de l'éco-conception, on a souvent le point d'entrée depuis un des sites qui sont sortis de l'usine à site, de se dire il y a des choses qui dépendent des contributeurs, il y a des choses qui dépendent des gens qui travaillent sur le site, mais il y a des choses qui doivent être embarquées directement dans la fabrique à site. Et quand on met le nez dans la fabrique à site, fort logiquement, on se rend compte qu'il y a des choses qui peuvent être embarquées directement dans Drupal, en tout cas qui devraient l'être. Donc pour ça, Mike en a déjà parlé, je ne vais pas trop m'éterniser dessus, mais c'est ce qui est en cours côté Drupal, diverses initiatives en cours, divers guides dédiés sur comment je réduis les impacts environnementaux de mon site Drupal. La plupart des trucs sont en anglais. Le dernier, c'est l'agence Adimeo qui a fait un webinaire sur le sujet et qui a sorti un article. Donc ça peut être un bon point de départ. Et après, c'est surtout des préconisations. Et le truc, c'est que on remarque qu'il y a beaucoup de préconisations quand on reste sur l'optimisation technique qui sont les mêmes que dans le domaine de la performance. À 80%, éco-conception au sens technique et performance, ça se recoupe. Après, il y a des trucs où l'éco-conception, forcément, ça va aller un peu plus loin, où il va y avoir des trucs où on ne sera pas d'accord avec la performance, mais il y a beaucoup de choses qu'on va retrouver, tout ce qui est le cache, minifier tout ce qu'on peut, les modules Minify.js, Advague, le choix de l'hébergeur, Varnish, Memcache, ça c'est plutôt classique. Pareil au niveau de la gestion des images. Donc ça c'est plutôt cool. Après, concrètement, niveau éco-conception, où on va un peu différer de la performance, c'est quand on va aller sur des considérations de conception. Disons que les premières questions, les premières remarques qu'on va faire aux clients, c'est ce truc-là, est-ce que vous en avez besoin? Est-ce que vous pouvez en mettre au moins? Est-ce que vous pouvez complètement l'éviter? Et souvent, ça part sur des discussions, stratégies, business, notamment pour les services tiers. Et en dernier recours, si c'est vraiment quelque chose qui est à l'heure actuelle nécessaire, derrière, on va aller sur l'efficience, sur l'optimisation technique pour que ce soit le moins impactant possible. Mais clairement, s'il y a un truc qu'on peut dégager dès le début, on le fait. C'est l'objet des revues de design, des revues des specs, de backlog et ainsi de suite. Et là, côté Drupal, ce qu'on se dit, c'est qu'il y a peut-être un levier, et ça, c'est des choses qui sont demandées dans le RGESN, pour soit nativement, soit via des extensions, afficher des impacts environnementaux au niveau des pages, au niveau de certaines fonctionnalités, au niveau de certains composants. L'idée, c'est que les internautes, quand ils sont sur une page, ils savent, ou quand ils vont faire un parcours, ils connaissent les impacts environnementaux qu'il y a derrière, ils font les choses en connaissance de cause, mais c'est surtout au niveau des contributeurs qui vont publier le contenu, qui sachent si là je mets tel composant plutôt qu'un autre, forcément ce sera plus impactant. Il y a aussi l'idée de laisser à l'utilisateur le choix de pouvoir réduire l'impact de ses usages, par exemple avec le mode sombre. Donc là, j'en parle pas trop ici, mais le problème qu'on a avec le mode sombre, alors le mode sombre, dans tous les cas, il y a des gains avérés niveau consommation CPU, niveau énergie, décharge de batterie, ainsi de suite. Le problème, c'est que les outils aujourd'hui qu'on va associer à l'éco-conception, ils vont mesurer la taille du DOM, le volume de données transférées, les requêtes HTTP, donc il va passer à côté des bénéfices du mode sombre. C'est nous l'avantage qu'on a, on va dire côté Inspector. Nous, vu qu'on regarde aussi côté CPU, des charges de batterie, mémoire, et ainsi de suite, bah là, côté CPU et des charges de batterie, on voit tout de suite l'impact. Dans le mode par défaut, c'est aussi l'idée de, au niveau du chargement des iframes et des images et différents médias, qu'est-ce qu'on peut faire pour proposer un contenu attractif et sobre à tout le monde et proposer à ceux qui veulent d'aller encore plus loin. Aujourd'hui, si vous allez sur le site de brest.fr, qui est un site Drupal, il y a un mode éco qui consiste, on va dire, principalement à ne pas afficher les images. Donc à la base, ils ont fait ça dans une démarche d'éco-conception et ils se sont rendus compte à l'usage que c'était beaucoup utilisé en cas de tempête. On se retrouve en connexion dégradée, on veut avoir les dernières infos en allant sur le site de la ville, bah, on désactive les images pour avoir l'info plus rapidement. C'était aussi plébiscité par les malvoyants. Donc en fait, c'est de même que quand on fait des choses pour l'accessibilité, ça bénéficie à tous les utilisateurs. Bah, l'exemple classique des sous-titres, mais il y a aussi plein d'autres choses comme ça. Bah, pour l'éco-conception, c'est un peu la même chose. Et souvent aussi, ce qu'on voit, c'est que ce qu'on fait côté éco-conception, ça a des bénéfices directement sur l'accessibilité et l'expérience utilisateur. L'idée, c'est aussi, donc là, c'est pas forcément un côté core Drupal, mais de se dire faciliter la vie pour pouvoir publier la déclaration d'éco-conception. J'ai oublié de vous dire le mode éco, cette histoire de ce qu'ils ont fait côté brest.fr sur le mode éco pour désactiver les images. Il y a l'agence Adimeo qui envisage de proposer ce plugin à la communauté d'ici la fin de l'année. Donc ça va dans le bon sens. Et je sais que dans les métropoles avec qui on travaille, eux, ils sont aussi dans la volonté de, si on fait des développements spécifiques qui contribuent à l'éco-conception, qui contribuent à l'accessibilité, on veut les reverser à la communauté ensuite. Donc ça, c'est vraiment top. Et après, c'est aussi de se dire, ça c'est un point dont on entend beaucoup parler, on entend un peu tout et n'importe quoi, c'est choisir un hébergeur qui veille à la réduction de ses impacts. Donc, c'est pas aller chez Azure ou AWS parce qu'ils vous disent qu'en 2030, ils seront neutres carbone. Ça, clairement, déjà, il y a peu de chances que ça arrive. Et surtout, c'est totalement pas probant. Enfin, c'est totalement du vent. Dire qu'on est neutre carbone quand derrière, on utilise des millions de litres d'eau chaque année, c'est d'un point de vue environnemental, c'est une aberration. Et pour la petite anecdote, d'ailleurs, Microsoft, ils sont toujours dans leur trajectoire neutralité carbone. À la base, ils disaient bah, tous les ans, on réduit nos impacts carbone de 9%. Et comme ça, en 2030, je ne sais plus ce que c'est précisément, mais je crois que c'est en 2030, on est neutre carbone. Quelques années plus tard, on est négatif carbone. Donc déjà, neutre carbone, c'était une aberration. Négatif carbone, on marche sur la tête. Et quand ils ont publié leur rapport il y a quelques semaines, ils se sont rendus compte que leurs émissions de gaz à effet de serre avaient augmenté de 29% en 2023, au lieu de diminuer de 9%. En grande partie à cause de l'intelligence artificielle. Donc voilà, quand on dit n'importe quoi, au bout d'un moment, il y a des conséquences. C'est le grand principe de la vie, le karma. Donc voilà. Donc là, j'ai fait le tour. Est-ce que, peut-être, je suis allé très très vite, est-ce que vous avez des questions peut-être?
I think just before we jump to the questions, it occurred to me there's a couple other things from your talk that would be useful to just to add on to. One is just a reminder that the individual impact of loading a web page or the CO2 impact of a small modification or improvement is something that is sometimes harder to see, but we're working in an industry that scales quite quickly, and so if something is part of if you're able to reduce 1 byte in Drupal core, well, that's going to be distributed across 1 million websites around the world, and that 1 byte reduced load time is something that will then propagate potentially every time a web page loads. So even a small change can iterate quite quickly to have a very large impact when you're scaling up at a community the size of Drupal. Also, just really like the phrase, individually we can go fast, but together we can go far. The whole digital sustainability movement is still quite new, certainly compared to the digital accessibility movement. But there's so much work that needs to be done, and we really need to try and work together in order to go off and to create as much change as possible to reduce our impact. And Maureen, you mentioned the Web Alliance, the Open Web Alliance at the beginning of this, and again, there's so much opportunity to collaborate with Typo3 and with others, WordPress and others, to try and say how do we how do we find best practices that we can apply across the board in all of our content management systems? So with those, with that sort of final thought, it's probably a good time to go off and to see if we can get some questions from the group.
Alors pour l'instant, je ne vois pas de questions dans le chat. Mais éventuellement, je peux en poser quelques-unes.
There's also quite a lot of resources out there on performance and sustainability that people might have themselves. If they want to contribute to that in the chat, or be able to talk about that, that's also something that we can certainly do.
Yes, if it's all right, I'll ask them in English so that maybe both Laurent and Mike can answer them. I'm right in the middle of a sustainability initiative in our project, so I'm very interested in the subject in general. And so thank you very much for both of your presentation. It was crystal clear. It was really interesting. And I have some very, maybe it's just minor detailed questions, but I'm learning the different ways around sustainabilities, and I have question around Drupal core and the way it handles things in general. And then I have question around some very specific details around those. Like, for example, one issue that rise very often dealing with sustainability is JavaScript in general. And the core, if you don't enable any aggregation system, you have by default many like MISC scripts that are loaded for the CMS purpose. And those scripts, even once aggregated and minified, they are often not used at all, in fact. So how would you say this is something we should improve on Drupal in general? And maybe are there anything we can already do about it today?
Absolutely, Nicholas. I definitely think that's something that we can do better at than we have. And I think that enabling things by default is something that the web industry has done for years, and I think that there are costs to that. So if we can look to make it a priority to go off and to fix these issues, so that we're by default launching as light as possible an implementation for just what is needed in the site, that is definitely worth doing. But it is something that comes with an additional cost for implementation. So it's really quite important that if we're going to be there's a trade-off, because we've definitely cut corners with core in order to go off and to put something out which is it's as light as we can make it for all intents and purposes. But it's if we want to optimize it even further, it will just take more time, and that's resources, people's time and effort to go off and to address these issues. But it should be done. Laurent, do you have any thoughts on that?
I think it's something we see on most websites based on CMS, because most often they tend to have, to want to propose most possible things as a base for the websites, but it should offer less functionalities to be more sustainable at the core, and then add the possibility to add new functionalities, because most of the time you find yourself with lots of things that you won't even use, and it doesn't make sense to me.
I've got another question, if it's all right. Mike, in the beginning of your session, you talked about headless implementations that tends to be faster and then more attractive on the sustainability subject. As Laurent said, the main issue is on the client side. So basically, whatever scripts you run on the client side is possibly an issue. So how can we solve this impossible equation, saying that headless, so JavaScript in general is very attractive for sustainability, but on the other hand, JavaScript is executed, is run on the client side, so on the worst part of the equation. I'm not sure I'm very
Yeah, no,
clear.
that's perfectly clear. But I think that the part of it is based on how we're thinking about pages being shipped and what is being passed back and forth. So if it's designed properly, then maybe we don't have to ship all of the bits back and forth. All we need to do is modify what's changed. So with HTML, you need to, when you jump from page to page, you need to reload everything, and all that information needs to be brought down and cached. But it's there isn't the assumption that the interface is smart enough to know what has changed from one page to the next. But with a headless implementation, you can just ship the content that has changed and modify the page accordingly. So I think that's potentially the route to go with that. But again, Laurent, I'd be interested in hearing your thoughts on headless and what your experiences are with evaluating this for other sites.
Well, maybe the part of the solution would be in the islands architecture, where the page is static by default, and then you hydrate only the parts that need to be dynamic when they need to be dynamic. Might be part of the solution, but if it's, I think part of the problem is also analytics today, because it's quite huge and not used that much. I mean, it's easy to collect tons of data, but we don't use most of it. So there are alternatives, like there's a version of Matomo that works only on the server side because it's based on the logs. So you don't have anything to run on the client side, and you solve some issues for privacy and security by functioning like that.
I also definitely concur that headless has problems with it because it's all built with JavaScript, and people who are running the JavaScript or who learn JavaScript don't learn HTML, because it can all be divs. It doesn't have to be semantic, whatever. We'll throw an area if necessary. So definitely see the problems with a lot of JavaScript development. And again, I think that we do need to try and push ourselves as a community to go off and do better, and to make sure that we're building something that is inclusive and sustainable. And I think that we also should be measuring, we should be measuring what the impacts are, and doing more work to actually evaluate it on the client side, because it's definitely something that we need to be learning about. Nicholas?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask something to Mike more specifically, because I know you're much involved in the community and in the core in general. I don't know if you got some infos about that, but recently we heard about a new initiative, the Starshot initiative. Do you know if there are any sustainability involvement in this initiative in particular, or if it's something that has still to be worked on?
I think it's still to be determined. I think that this is the right time to be pushing for both accessibility and sustainability to be part of Starshot. There's a lot of excitement around it. The people who are at DrupalCon Portland were definitely quite excited by the challenge and the opportunity that Dries brought to the community. But we do have to make sure that nobody's left behind. And as we sort of build this community initiative, but also that we're building for the future. I mean, the Starshot has to be light, it has to be nimble, it has to be something that is, if we're thinking about that metaphor, we need a payload that you can get into orbit and sustain. So, I think we need to challenge the Starshot developers to make sure that sustainability is an essential part of this, and that we're not forgetting it because we want to add some other fancy features.
Yes, in RGESN, you've got recommendations for strategy, in business strategy, UX and UI design, and it's well, most of our time, our job is to make the client reasonable. It's not the easiest part, but with the legal obligations and we've got also some arguments about accessibility. When we don't want to have a video with autoplay and they don't want to listen to environmental impact and so on, we remind them that for accessibility, it's really bad. And sometimes they listen. Not always, but most of the time they listen. But I mean, the developers, it's not the big issue with sustainability. They've been doing most of these things for performance or just because they want their websites well done. They've been doing that for many years, but the clients, it's very, very more difficult. I'll send you a link to a playbook for product managers. I don't know if it will help, but I think what will really help is when we get more and more feedbacks on sustainability and what it brings to business, because most of the time with the clients, you have to talk with business arguments to make them listen.
So just wanted to add just that the accessibility world is coming to deal with roles and the importance of defining certain roles, and the UK government and the US government have both created documents where they've sort of broken down the roles around sort of digital accessibility, and something similar to that needs to happen for digital sustainability as well. And I think that's hopefully something that can be part of the web the sustainablewebdesign.org website going ahead, because that's another really useful resource. Now we've got two people who've got questions, Nicholas and Tom. Tom, maybe you could go first since you haven't spoken, but then we'll jump back to Nicholas's question afterwards.
Oh yeah, I just wanted to ask, I don't think it was mentioned, but of course the W3C published their Web Sustainability Manifesto, which is quite lightweight from what I remember. But so how would that, I guess, tie in? Are we hoping that gets more traction and we can use that as the kind of global thing? Or is it going to be kind of the French model and then hopefully with Europe is going to kind of push that and based itself? I guess, yeah, my question is, what are the interrelationships that are going to happen and where do we see the pressure building most?
I think that every country that's pioneering this is going to want to go off and hold on to their own set of guidelines and use that as the default. So France is probably going to push for what they've developed, and there's a correlation between what France is implementing and the web sustainability guidelines. I think that there's definitely people looking at the WC3 as an example. So I think that that's definitely worthwhile to hold on to as a model that others have implemented. It's much easier to go off and to adopt a WC3 standard than it is for say Canada or the US to adopt France's standard. So I think that there's possibilities with that. But Laurent, what do you think about this?
Yes, I think Mike and I, we both work on the WSG. So yes, this is, I think they've got many, it's a great resource. And we've got links to the RGESN in the WSG, so it's a good starting point, but we've got to find something in common to work on this topic, and it might be the most difficult part, because, correct me if I'm wrong, Mike, but what I see from France is that when people started working on accessibility, there were already the WCAG that existed. So most of the repositories were based on the WCAG, and it made things easier. Some take more or less of the recommendations from the WCAG, but they're all based on this. But with sustainability, we all did the things at the same time, the RGESN, the WSG. So there are some common points, but sooner or later they have to learn to work together, because as of today we have no référentiel de compétences in France, meaning that if you train people on sustainability, you cannot deliver a diploma, a valid diploma to them. So the sustainability, it started really fast, and sooner or later we have to rest and see how we all work together on this to avoid having this country does this country does that, but they don't do exactly the same thing, because it will be problematic, I think.
I just want to say that there are a lot of countries that did do their own thing on accessibility, like the UK had their own standard. The US Section 508 is a sort of certainly a big, well-known accessibility differentiator, but they're now much more aligned with WCAG guidelines for there's very little difference at this point between Section 508 and WCAG for the in terms of websites, but there definitely are countries that have adopted their own standard for accessibility. Quebec did one for a long time. Quebec is still very much working with something that's very close to WCAG 1.0, so it's really out of date because they've gone off and not kept up with the best practices of the rest of the community. But absolutely, if we're able to, like, technology is global. If we can agree to a common global standard, it's something that will help out a lot for adoption. And again, this is a great opportunity for people to look at getting potentially involved in looking at the web sustainability guidelines, looking to see if there's things that they can implement for their own projects. But then, for France, you have to go off and look at the legislation and what's being required for the French legislation. Does that answer your question, Tom?
Yeah, thanks.
And Nicholas.
Yeah, thank you. As you said, most of the thing must start. I think it's Marine who said it's on the conception side already, that you have to think of everything to be sure you're dealing with your project properly. As for today, on my side, people in the UX field, on the client side, they are all asking me, because I'm the technician in the team, they are all asking me what they should do to be sure to be sustainable, because they think that the technical part is driving the thing, and they are not totally wrong on that side. But I am not an expert, and I'm not sure how I can bring them the right information, so I can give you the very beautiful resources that you've shared today. But if you had to talk to some people asking you how they should work with their expertise around the sustainability subject, what would you say to them? Like, what would be your top 3 advices for them, for example?
I think that there's definitely a challenge to go off and figure out how to get started. And the web sustainability guidelines is quite extensive. There's been an effort to try and pare it down to make it easier for people to get started with, but it is a challenge. One of the things that we've tried to do is build in that journey into the document. So there's the phrase in accessibility that it's progress over perfection, or proving progress over perfection. I think that part of the challenge is just getting started. So can you set a page budget? So how large do you want your pages to be? Can you make sure that all of your pages are under a megabyte, so you're not delivering additional bloated content? Can you make sure you're structuring it so that you're removing unneeded JavaScript as an example, so you're again limiting the amount that you're doing? Can you help train people to go off and upload images, to use WebP or AVIF or other formats? You can use SVG files. Again, there's lots of ways that we can potentially use this to get started down the path. But the main thing is to get started early, because there will be a lot less technical debt if people start acting on it now, based on using tools like the website carbon.com or EcoGrader to provide a page analysis, than if you wait and do it in 6 months' time. So just there's so much advantages to starting early.
Yes, I think that one of the first things would be to try to measure what you're doing, if you can. If there's already something online, the point is you start measuring and estimating the environmental impact, and then when you do some additional things, you can see through measurements the benefits, and then you get motivated to go further. If you want to do some concrete things, so like Mike said, first the images, because I mean, I've done lots and lots of audits, and it's always the first problem on most of the websites, even if it's one of the easiest things to do. So it's the images, avoid animations, and if you can, RGESN, read it if you can, do an audit. But if you just read it, you'll learn lots of things about sustainability, so it can be a good starting point. And I think if you start with this and spread the word, try to do what people are doing about this, it can only go better, because it's really, really continuous improvement. I think it's one of the most important aspects of sustainability. No matter what you start with, if you start today and go on day after day, you'll only get better.
I posted a link from an article that Andy Blum went off and wrote a few months back around an early release of the web sustainability guidelines, and I was talking with Andy about this at DrupalCon Lille, and I think there are a lot of opportunities to look at how to incorporate this into the work that you're doing, and it's just starting with what you're comfortable with. If you're a front end person, if you're a developer, trying to understand what the elements are that are applicable to you.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, I think it's maybe the main problem when you get started with sustainability. You can't measure environmental impact, so it's necessarily flawed. Your results are obviously they have to be inaccurate, but it's not an issue as long as it's not totally irrelevant. You have to keep in mind these orders of magnitude to get started, but whatever the results, the only important thing is to reduce these impacts. So it's if you want to measure websites, web pages through the different websites, the different tools available, you will find as many results as you have tools, but it's not a problem. I think the problem is not here. As Mike stated, the problem is the volume of the usage. For instance, I work with some clients with websites and user journeys that are done 20 million times per month. So it doesn't matter if it's 1, 2, or 3 grams of CO2, it's too much. And every slight improvement will have a tremendous effect at the end on the environmental impact.
I agree that it's a real challenge to try and deal with these numbers, and it's not it's a very rapidly evolving area. So we have to try and the stats that you may get from 6 months ago may not be the same as they are now. One of the things that is often overlooked, though, is I mean, there's the electrical consumption, but there's also embedded carbon, and looking at how if websites are getting bigger and requiring more resources to manage them, and is forcing users to go off and update their devices on a every 2 or 3 years from a mobile perspective, that's something that does have a large environmental impact, and something that we again, it's hard to track down how much is when are websites causing a website to be too slow. But if you're able to go off and improve the performance of your website and reduce the amount of resources that are available, then it is something that should allow you to go off and use your devices for longer, and reduce the impact of or reduce the number of people who feel that they need to go off and upgrade to the latest iPhone simply because some pages are taking them a little bit longer to load. Yeah, my wife has one as well, and it's definitely a much more sustainable option. Just sort of building how they built it in a modular level that allows it to be more easily repaired. Definitely appreciate that, and we need to have that example be scaled out across the consumer device industry. But it's also something to think about when we're looking at the servers that we're with. How long are those data centers designed to last for? If the data centers can get another extra year or two of life from them, that's a substantial environmental impact. If we can just make our systems last longer, and if we can just be more mindful about the resources that are going into our this infrastructure that we're depending on, and finding ways to. I mean, 1 or 2 emails isn't going to really matter, but we don't really, as an industry, have any way to go off and delete something. Like, I've got lots and lots of pictures. Do I really need all 100,000 pictures I have on Flickr? Probably not. How do I determine which are the ones I need to delete? Like, it's not an easy issue. So how do we try and prioritize it so that we can get machines to help us do what humans are not good at, and make decisions that are easier for machines to do ultimately. Is anyone curious about AI and sustainability? Yeah, it definitely is using more and more electricity. I think that the number of even for those leaders in digital sustainability, like Google and Microsoft have done a huge amount to go off and to improve the sustainability of their digital infrastructure and provide greener services. But they're so busy pushing for that race around AI that they're all of those sustainability goals are getting pushed to the side. So it's a real challenge, and as AI is getting thrown into everything, whether it's your command line tool or your IDE, it is something that we need to be thinking about and be more conscious about our use of this technology, and realize that when you use Bing and Copilot in Bing or whichever to go off into to search, that's using probably 100 times more energy to go off and to access information than it would be just to maintain a search. Laurent, are you a big fan of AI?
Not exactly. No. I'd say I don't want to sound like an old man, but back in the day, we already had concerns about the ethical implications of AI, and now we want to use it everywhere for everything. And it's obviously bad for sustainability, for the autonomy of users. So, and we have to keep in mind that it's not a machine that will be right every time. It's not a calculator or something like that. So we're prone to mistakes with AI, but there are some domains where we don't want mistakes. I mean, predictive police and things like that. It's not the kind of stuff where you want to have mistakes and not see them. So we should be, well, precautious about AI. The environmental impacts, like I said, with Microsoft are catastrophic, and we still use it everywhere for everything, even if we don't know how it works and how to see if the result is right or wrong. So we should not use it. I think today it sounds a little extreme, but before using it, we must ask ourselves, do we accept mistakes? Like, autonomous cars. You don't want your car to do something on its own and kill someone, for instance, because it's bad. And on the on the law, it's a real mess in addition to this. So we don't know how it works, and we don't want it to miss. So we should not use it for things where there will be mistakes and we cannot afford it, like robodebt, predictive police, and other things like that. And even, we had the case with Copilot with the fact that it can introduce some security errors in your code without you noticing this. So I don't think it's a good thing either. So yeah, AI, no, I don't think it's a good idea.
And in the end, there's also an issue that is rising more and more, is that the more contents generated by AI, the more AI are trained by their own content, and there is a trend with an average kind of content that are always generated because they are like they fuel their own contents with themselves, so there is no originality anywhere anymore. So with code, for example, you give bad codes to an AI and you cannot get any good code at the end,
And I did actually want to also ask, just not that we can't talk more about AI, but specifically with the RGESN, have people? I'm curious what experience people have with it, if anyone has been asked about implementing this for their clients, or if there's things that they're trying to go off and implement. Nicholas, you've been asked to do this, and people are coming to you for these answers. Are other people in the same boat?
Yeah, and generally the AI stuff is pushed just to be trendy. You know, it's not like we have a real use case where AI could be really efficient. It's just that AI is the stuff, so we need AI.
Yes, we had the same with the metaverse a few years ago. Fortunately, it didn't work, but I hope the same for AI.
Yeah, it was unfortunately, it was presenting. Well, it was fortunate enough to present at FOSDEM in Brussels about. I think it was presenting about sustainability or accessibility. I can't remember which one I was presenting on, but there were 2 sessions beforehand. I got into the room early, and the rooms were just completely packed for 2 different sessions on AI, and I got up to speak about basically people and planet, and it's not like the room was empty, but it wasn't like there was the demand like there is for AI. There's definitely such a curiosity or a concern or a I'm going to use this to get rich quick or whatever. Like there's an appetite for AI, which is definitely concerning given the lack of thought about what the impacts of that are. Thank you so much, Maureen. This is great. I mean, but I think it's exciting that this is the beginning of a journey for so many people, and so this is a really great time to go off and to get involved, to learn, and very quickly you can become an expert because there's a lot of other people who haven't even heard about this problem yet. So it's a good time to jump on board.